I'm Jane Goldman, and I'm investigating the world of the paranormal. And tonight you're going to see what happened when I set out to investigate poltergeists. Poltergeist. The word comes from the German for noisy ghost. But for those who believe they've encountered a poltergeist, noise is often the least of their complaints. I investigated 3 cases that were terrifying for their victims. In these cases, witnesses claim that poltergeists have thrown things, levitated people, scratched them, and even spoken. Some argue, though, that poltergeists are not actually ghosts at all, but the effects of some kind of destructive energy generated by adolescents. So what is going on? My first case took me to the small town of Seymour in Connecticut. This community was one of the earliest established by English settlers, and houses in the area date back to the 16th century. Soon after the sudden death of her young husband in 1995, Bonnie Beckwith moved to New England with her 2 teenage daughters. From the very first day she decided to move to this old house just outside Seymour, Bonnie and her family felt they were victims of poltergeist attack.
Actually, it started before we even thought it did. When we pulled in the driveway, my daughter felt very uneasy, and she said that she didn't want to come into the house because it was evil. When they're in the room, you feel pure hate. It feels like someone is standing this close to your face, staring you down, with nothing but pure hate and evil.
Over the next 4 years, Bonnie and her family suffered many strange and terrifying experiences in the house. Pictures would fly off the walls, fires would start, and strange images would appear in photos. Bonnie was determined not to be driven out of her house by anything, not even a poltergeist. But her daughters moved away as soon as they were old enough.
I've heard a little bit about your experiences at the house, which sound extraordinary. I mean, do you remember when it first all started?
We were down the street, not even at the house yet, and I just knew we were like getting close, but I had something like a feeling just that like you don't want to go here, and there's something in there that just didn't want us there. It felt like really strong and just a creepy vibe. I always felt like I was being watched, like there was something or someone like right over my shoulder, breathing down my neck. It was like I was just afraid.
There was a night that I was on the phone with a friend of mine. It was approximately 11:30, 12 o'clock at night, and my bed actually had raised off of the floor and hovered for probably about a minute and a half, and then landed back on the ground. I didn't know what to expect or what to think. I just froze. I was terrified. You can't see anything, so how are you supposed to react to something that you can't see? You can only feel. On top of that, you can't even prove it. I've never felt that scared in my life. You don't know what to think, really.
What the fuck's going on? Do you feel like you're in danger? There have been times where we have been absolutely terrified when you see things that aren't supposed to happen and they happen, and you don't know what to do. You can't shoot it. How are you going to protect yourself?
After a desperate phone call from Bonnie one evening in November 1998, internationally known demonologist Lorraine Warren visited the house. Over the following weeks, Bonnie carefully followed Lorraine's advice on dealing with the poltergeist, and the terrifying incidents came to a halt. At least that's how it looked. But after a 4-year break, the attacks seemed to start all over again. Lorraine was back to find out what was going on.
There's a lot of phenomena happening in here. But see, without the energy of the girl who lived here, a lot of that has subsided. But everything is still not gone. We had researchers actually stay in this room all night.
Did things happen while the researchers were
Yes,
there?
yes.
What
yes.
happened?
We had movement of objects. We had the drawers that would move in and out by themselves and things like that. And the mattress. The mattress, it was like somebody punched it from underneath. This was a bedroom. There were people in here, and as a result, there was laws of attraction. I don't know. I'd have to look at notes to see if there was any occult practices, Ouija boards, or anything of that nature. I'm going to ask that downstairs.
Is it something you come across a lot?
All the time. That can trigger so much. You're in a home where spirits are dormant and waiting for the opportunity to be activated. It's uncomfortable for me here right now. This room is very uncomfortable for me.
So having now come in and felt this in this room, you feel it definitely warrants further attention?
Yes, it does. Definitely.
The New England case was shaping up to look well worth further investigation. It had all the hallmarks of a typical poltergeist. And so did my next case, which after almost 30 years remains the most famous in the world. After the break, spirit voices and levitating schoolgirls as my investigations continue in North London with the Enfield poltergeist.
I just couldn't believe what I was seeing. It was by far the weirdest thing that's ever happened to me.
It was obvious to me the case was genuine. Everybody was terrified.
This very ordinary house on this very ordinary North London street doesn't look any different to its neighbours or to thousands of others like it across Britain. But 27 years ago, it was front page news. Strange events that took place inside.
Living here in 1977 was the recently divorced Peggy Harper and her 4 children.
Over a 6-month period, scores and scores of people claimed to have witnessed poltergeist activity. Policemen, journalists, scientists, they said they saw furniture moving by itself. Children appeared to float through the room, and they heard strange and frightening voices. The Enfield poltergeist, as it came to be known, was to be the most investigated and the most famous ghost case ever.
It started on August the 30th, 1977. The mother had just put the children to bed. She'd come downstairs into the lounge. She was sitting there doing something or other. She heard a lot of noise going on upstairs. She thought, oh my God, why don't the children go to sleep? She went upstairs to the bedroom and went in the room and said, for God's sake, shut up and go to sleep. One of the boys piped up, we can't because the furniture's moving. She said, don't be so ridiculous. And just as she was about to walk out of the room, the chest of drawers moved slightly across the room. Of course, she was terrified. And from then on, it started to get rough.
One of the earliest visitors to the Harpers' house on the night it all began was Graham Morris, a photographer working for the Daily Mirror.
I worked on a newspaper who got a call from this family's next door neighbours who were sheltering them after something had happened in this house that they had no idea what it was, but just sort of strange things had gone on. Furniture shifting, things whizzing around, flying around the room. Everyone was fairly sceptical until the woman on the phone said, well, the police who are here, they've seen what's happening. And with that gave it sort of air of authority, respectability. And they said, right, okay, dispatch myself and reporter up to the house. It would have been something like midnight by the time we arrived there. We stood there and waited, nothing happening. Got the cameras ready, flash guns turned on. Then they brought the children in, but it was just as one of the girls came in that things just took off. I mean, it wasn't sort of Hollywood, it wasn't just everything whizzing around like the Wizard of Oz, but it was just certain things would just fly across the room. I got hit in the head by a just tiny little Lego brick, so I'm fairly sceptical anyway, and I was sort of watching the children to see if they were doing it, but it wasn't coming from there. It was just things would just sort of take off. The family from next door were going around hiding all the knives and forks so that they wouldn't fly around, and we had no idea what was going to happen. We didn't know people were going to end up getting killed. If I hadn't have been there photographing, I think I would have been out the door.
But Graham didn't run out of the door. He stayed long after the Daily Mirror photographic assignment had ended. A week later, he was joined by Maurice Gross, a researcher from the Society for Psychical Research. The two men virtually lived in the house for the next 6 months, and both witnessed events that seemed to defy the laws of physics.
It was obvious to me the case was genuine. Everybody was terrified. And it was only a little while, I'd only been there a little while, when I was standing in the kitchen myself, next to the kitchen table, and there was a T-shirt on the table, and it literally leapt off the table onto the floor, right in front of me. And I thought, right, well, that's it, you know, I've seen something for myself. And from then onwards, I stuck with the case.
Over the coming months, a stream of visitors came to the house. Everyone from research physicists to international demonologists tried to make sense of the things they were witnessing as the events at the house became more and more extreme.
It was not just known in the UK, it was known worldwide,
Lorraine Warren was one of the expert visitors.
where furniture would move and it would kind of go against the doors so you couldn't open the upstairs doors. Then it reached the point of levitating, where the two girls would levitate and crisscross in the air.
Although different phenomena happened all over the house throughout the day and night, Mrs. Harper's eldest daughter, Janet, always seemed to be at the centre of these amazing levitations.
Let me tell you about the levitation as seen by independent witnesses.
Okay.
The baker's roundsman was coming down the road. He heard a terrific commotion going on in the girl's bedroom. The curtains had been pulled aside so he could see quite clearly into the room. He saw Janet going round the room in a horizontal manner like this, followed by some books and some toys, going round and round.
She was floating.
Floating. He said, I was terrified. She came right up to the window and he thought she was going to crash into the window and come out. She didn't. She went round again. Now, opposite is a school. And outside the school was a lollipop woman. And she's standing there waiting for the children to come out of school. And she hears a commotion. And she looks up. And what does she see? She sees Janet going up and down in a horizontal position like this. And according to the angle and everything we measured, she was going off the bed and 18 inches above the windowsill, like this, up and down. So here we have two independent witnesses who saw the levitation at the same time.
Because the events at Enfield happened in the days before home video, Graham had to rely on a setup of remotely triggered cameras in an attempt to record any levitation activity that occurred in the girls' bedroom. But although the photographs taken did capture Janet in mid-air, they did not answer the question of how she got there.
A lot of the evidence for poltergeist cases is photographic evidence or film evidence, but you never actually see the object rising and moving. It's always while the object is moving. So in other words, in particular cases, if a camera is centered on, for example, this cup in the middle of the air, but the difficulty is in interpreting that is we don't see the cup at the point at which it first moved. So we can't attribute the movement to poltergeist necessarily. And that's the difficulty with interpreting a lot of the photographic and film evidence.
You see, the problem we had was you couldn't, the first picture was never there. The first picture of a sequence, it was too soon. It was only once you, through sitting downstairs, heard somebody scream, you then thought, there's something happening now. Press the button. You start to take a sequence of pictures. So you never had the first one of her just lying in bed.
Right.
don't forget, we're talking about sitting in this house for hours and hours and hours every night. It was just boring for 90% of the time until something like this happened. And then it takes you by surprise. You suddenly, oh, quick, something happened, press the button. By this time, the first picture you get is of a girl seemingly jumping in the air.
Could you be sure that she wasn't jumping?
Nope, because I wasn't there. I was downstairs. This is all shot automatically. But you have to be a bit of a masochist to want to do that for fun. So many times a night as well, to get thrown out of bed up in the air, land on your face, get up and do it again. That's
What's going on here?
Janet, who seemed to be the sort of epicenter of just about everything. There was suddenly a sort of scream and a crash, and then we ran upstairs and found Janet lying on top of the radio in the corner of her bedroom. I mean, we're talking about an old house here. It was very creaky floorboards, bed springs that make a noise. You could hear everything that was going on. There was no way that she got out of bed, tiptoed across the room, climbed up onto the radio and then screamed, and everybody rushed into the room, and yeah, something else has happened.
On the 10th of December, 4 months after the team first arrived at the Enfield house, something remarkable happened. The poltergeist seemed to take control of Janet, and suddenly she began speaking with the voice of an old man. Morris made this extraordinary recording.
Days before I died, I went blind. Then I had an hemorrhage, and I fell asleep, and I died in a chair in a corner downstairs.
This one, I have to tell you what he says, because otherwise you won't understand exactly what he's saying.
Right.
I'm 72 years old and I come from Durrance Park Graveyard, and I'm right near the church where Rena lives. All my friends come from there as well, and we all make a gang and go to the park, and we picked your house because I used to live here.
I'm 72 years old. I come from Durrance Park Graveyard, and I am right near the church where Rena lives. And all my friends come from there as well. And we all make a gang and go to the park. And then we pick your house because I used to live here.
Right,
That's really disturbing.
that is an 11-year-old girl.
The amount of evidence the Enfield researchers had collected was impressive, but it was difficult to see how it could provide me with any new information. I needed to talk to Janet, the girl at the centre of the case, to find out how the events seemed to her. I knew she had not given any interviews since she'd grown up, and I wasn't sure if she'd agreed to talk to me. But I called her anyway, left a message on her voicemail, and hoped for a reply. After the break, the investigation continues when Janet gives her first television interview.
I felt I was possessed because I felt used so much by the poltergeist.
A few days after I left a phone message, Janet, the girl at the centre of the Enfield case, responded to my call. She'd never given an interview before, but she agreed to meet me in a small town on the coast. As a child at the centre of the poltergeist activity, she'd apparently had first-hand experiences that would have driven many adults over the edge. According to the stories, she'd levitated, seen objects fly around the room, walked through walls, and been possessed by a spirit who spoke through her. All that while she was a vulnerable 11-year-old trying to cope with her mother's divorce. Now she was 40, married, with children of her own, and she didn't want to be recognised, so she agreed to be interviewed if we kept her face hidden.
Some of the things that happened, like levitation, the voices, like things flying around and furniture moving, being tipped over. People would say that's impossible. It's just hard really for people to understand, and people would take the mick and say, oh, this is a load of rubbish. But when you experience it and you know that it is real, and so many witnesses, professionals on the outside have come in and actually seen things and experienced things, you know. We just don't take no notice of what the critics say now.
Janet, thank you so much for coming to meet me, because I know it's not something you've talked about in public a lot over the years at all. And I was also kind of wondering what made you change your mind.
It's my story.
Yeah.
Everyone else can tell my side of the story, but why can't I do it, you know?
Do you feel that it has changed your whole life?
Yes. And school life wasn't easy when, you know, you've gone to school and it's splashed on the front of the paper that you're possessed and you're bullied over it. It came to a point where I didn't want to go to school because of it. Then when I got there, I settled after a while and I didn't want to come home to face the music of so many people in the house, so much going on. And in the end I became so confused I didn't know where I wanted to be. It was strange, but at the same time it was fascinating.
Right.
It was quite scary as well, I suppose.
Did you, at the time, have any sense of what might have been going on?
A lot of it went on around me, I know that. I just felt maybe like I attracted it for some reason. Maybe my age. When I look back now, I wonder how I got through it. So many other incidents, levitation.
Were you conscious of that happening? Because I've heard what witnesses have said. How did it feel for you?
Strange, very strange. And frightening at the same time, when you didn't know where you were going to land always.
So you'd be aware that you'd, floated up?
Floated, and sometimes it felt like a force.
Like being thrown on?
My mum saw me rise from the bed. I just went through the blankets. When I look back now, I felt like some of the time I was in some sort of trance. And there was the episode where it's hard to explain, but I went through the wall.
Did you think that it was happening in your head, or it felt absolutely real?
Real, absolutely real. How can solid go through solid, you know? I still feel that something had a hold of me and I was possessed. I felt I was possessed because I felt used so much by the poltergeist. But what else would you call it when things like this were happening, you didn't feel in control? And then there was the voices.
I'm going to do it now. I can't do it now. I can't.
Physically, it didn't feel like I was speaking at all. It did feel like it was coming from around me, but within me in some way, like it was used in me. It was very embarrassing a lot of the time because of the foul language that was used. As I see it now, something was taking me over. But why me? Why was I the centre of it all?
I think that's probably the most incredible personal experience I've ever heard. And you know, the weirdest thing is that while I was listening to Janet, there was not a single moment when I doubted the truth of anything she was saying. And I suppose what's weird about it is that
it is such an extraordinary story. It's filled with things that shouldn't happen and shouldn't be possible. And I believed every word of it, and I don't see how anyone could feel any different meeting Janet.
Looking back at the poltergeist activity I'd been investigating, there did seem to be a pattern. Both the case I'd looked at so far had involved adolescent girls going through a particularly stressful time in their lives. My next case was to be completely different. I was to travel up to Scotland to look into what could be the most active poltergeist in Britain today. Every night for years, guides have led groups through Edinburgh's streets, scaring them with ghost stories associated with the town's history. Then suddenly, 4 years ago, the people on one particular tour found that they had become part of their very own ghost story. Tourists visiting tombs in a certain part of the Greyfriars Cemetery, known as the Covenanters' Prison, were suffering from attacks by something unseen. Many suffered from scratches and bruising after visiting the tombs. Others were knocked unconscious by a mysterious force. Since the Mackenzie poltergeist attacks started on January the 25th, 1999, over 130 people have been knocked unconscious and over 400 have been scratched or bruised.
First I went on with some friends, and my friend had scratches and nothing happened to me, and the next day I went home and discovered bruises about this big all on the inside of my leg from all the way up. So I went on it again, and I was just listening to the tour guide, and then the next thing, just hit the deck.
You just collapsed?
Just went down. And I remember getting sort of carried half out of the tomb.
I remember everybody laughing, and then everything it was like someone pressed a switch and I went black, and the next thing I know I sort of woke up outside on the ground with everybody looking out and saying, "Are you okay, are you okay?"
It's really hard to describe, and I still struggle to describe, but it was like I got hit to the head, but it was from inside my head, sort of like a whack. And I just heard this voice saying, "Get out," yelling, "Get out." And I don't know if it was me in my mind or what it was, but I just heard this voice, and I just bolted. And I was really scared. It felt really evil. And it wasn't until the next day when I woke up and I had 2 scratches about that long, right in the middle of my back, so I couldn't actually get to them. But that just made me feel sick because they looked like fingernail scratches. They just looked like they were quite raised and sore.
So this has actually got notes in the hand of George Mackenzie.
The Mackenzie poltergeist is named after a 17th century Scot called George Mackenzie. When he was the King's advocate in Scotland, he was responsible for the persecution and imprisonment of a group of religious rebels called the Covenanters, who started an armed uprising. When the Covenanters' army was finally defeated by the King's soldiers, over 1,000 were locked up here in this corner of the graveyard with no shelter in the middle of winter. Here in Greyfriars, there were certainly no teenage girls to blame. So could the poltergeist attacks be connected in some way to Mackenzie or to the 1,000 Covenanters who died here? After all, it was after Mackenzie's grave was damaged that the attacks began.
An old tramp actually fell into the tomb. He was just messing around in there one night and uncovered the coffins of Mackenzie's family and caused quite a lot of damage down there. And about 3 days later, all the first weird incidents kicked off. This is the tomb of George Mackenzie, and this is where the tramp fell through. So,
but the activity seems to mainly take place down there, does it?
Yeah, it started here, and then most of the stuff happened in the Covenanters' prison, which was nearby.
In spite, or perhaps because of, the frequency of the attacks, the ghost tours are very popular. Even in the middle of winter, 2 tours every night walk through the graveyard. I joined one, hoping for my own encounter with the Mackenzie poltergeist.
The Victorians estimated that 2% of the population of the city had at one time been buried alive. They thought they knew about this because they found scratch marks and teeth marks on the roofs of coffins where people had tried to crawl and bite their way out.
Karen, who had been a poltergeist victim before, made another visit to the tomb with me that night. As our guide led us into the danger zone of the Covenanters' prison, I wondered if she'd be a victim again, or if this time it would be me.
I'm going to tell you how to avoid the blackouts because it's actually very easy to do. A poltergeist will act as a predator. It will try to single somebody out from the crowd, separate them from the crowd, and that's when it will attack, which is why I've asked you to stand close together. I ask everyone to get right back. The attacks often seem to happen near the gates, which is where I'm making sure I stand.
Whatever had affected Karen before seemed to be affecting her again, because after only a few minutes inside the tomb, she started to look uncomfortable.
Breathe aside. Really, are you okay, Helen? Are you sure? You just moved?
Yeah, I'm just cold legs.
Oh, legs. Okay. Are you okay standing where you are there? Yeah. Just let me know if you want to. Yeah, that's fine. Okay. Now, the weird thing is, I said to that group that night, and I always say to my tour parties, if you wake up in the morning with scratches or bruises on you, then you need to get out.
No, okay, no.
Are you sure?
It's just travelling. It's only up to my knees. It's all right.
Were you better there where you were before?
No, I'm all right now.
Okay. And he said they hadn't been there before as well. Now, to be fair, the man didn't come in to see us, so I don't know for certain he was telling the truth, but he did sound really sincere on the phone, and I believed him. Are you okay?
It wasn't long before Karen was so disturbed by something that she felt she had to get out and left the tomb in tears. Okay, so that was weird. Karen just felt really like she had to get out of there. She said there was a feeling of coldness creeping up her legs and she felt threatened and she wanted to get out. And she was crying and she didn't really want to be filmed anymore either, so she's gone now. As the rest of the group wandered off, I took the chance to spend a few minutes alone in the tomb. Oh God, fuck, sorry. My shawl fell off. God, it's funny how you get so jumpy in here. I do feel kind of a pins and needles sort of feeling all up my back. It's quite a distinct feeling. Actually, it's a weirdly distinct feeling. It's kind of like that feeling, you know, when there's a weird moment, like in a movie or something, when I don't know what it is. It's that feeling like being hosed down with hot treacle. Like when something happens and you get that sort of real visceral reaction to it. I do feel like that. Oh, I hesitate to use the word energy, but it does feel funny in here. While I was concentrating on the strange feeling the tomb was causing, Peter, our director, also started to feel something odd.
Okay, now that was really strange.
Did you really feel something?
Yeah, I was standing in the corner and I felt a really kind of cold feeling down the back of my neck, and it felt like almost like there's a kind of rustling noise and like a kind of like prickling on my neck. Like this collar was kind of like prickling up.
Yeah. It's really weird, isn't it, Peter? Definitely something in here that goes beyond it just being a spooky room in a cemetery. It's not so much that I feel scared or spooked, it's just this. I'm really glad you felt something as well. Sitting in here alone, I didn't feel
so much frightened as just there's something very odd. I don't use the word presence because it's not like a human presence, but there's just a really funny, I don't know, sense of something being really not right in this space at all. It's really not normal.
There were definitely strange things happening in the Covenanters' prison, but were they anything to do with a poltergeist? Some research suggests that low-frequency sound, called infrasound, that's too low for human ears to register, can cause that creeping feeling and sense of presence that Peter and I experienced. So perhaps the acoustics of the tombs were creating natural infrasound. But what about the blackouts? Were they really poltergeist attacks, or just a type of mass hysteria brought on by the victim's expectations and the guide's suggestions of an attack? It's not impossible. In 1993, 150 people fainted at a Cairo railway station because of a false rumour they'd heard that something was causing other people to faint. For now, though, it remains a mystery. Although I have a feeling that while the Mackenzie poltergeist continues to draw in the crowds, nobody's in too much of a hurry to solve the enigma. The same could not be said for Bonnie in New England, who was getting increasingly desperate for a solution. After the break, I returned to Bonnie's house and the search for the New England poltergeist.
I just feel like the skin on the back of my neck and all down my spine was crawling.
I returned to New England to find Bonnie still apparently suffering from disturbing poltergeist activity, yet more determined than ever to understand its cause and rid her house of the problem permanently. A week after Lorraine's assessment visit to Bonnie's house, her research team moved in. The entire house was laced with infrared cameras, audio recorders and other sensing equipment by techie John, researcher Barbie and team leader Dave.
I was jumping around between 1.8 and 2 millibars, so that indicates that there's something there. Like I said, I have a feeling we're going to see activity tonight.
Dave was particularly interested in reports of an apparition that had been spotted on more than one occasion.
There is a small girl that has been seen from time to time, so we don't know if she's associated with this house. So she may be associated with this house. She has been known to say why, so we don't know exactly why. Why is she saying that? She may be associated with the house. She seems to be coming towards this house.
Now, you were saying that you weren't sure that she was a human girl.
Well, we don't know. That's why we're here. We need to find out.
The team didn't have long to wait before things started happening. Moments after Barbie had plugged in the camera, the team spotted their first anomalies on the monitor. Light orbs, referred to in America as globules.
You got globules coming at you. I'm going to start recording.
Start recording. They were coming right at the camera.
It smells like ozone. It smells like after lightning in the room Barbie's in now. Ozone. Dave?
What's going on?
Barbie says she just felt like somebody was standing behind her.
Tell her to.
Oh, it's what she's seeing. She's seeing shadows. Barb's mom's coming up to visit with you.
Whereabouts were you seeing it, Bob?
It was right there on the wall, in the area of where the curtain is and stretching over to where the picture frame was.
Right.
It was really distinctive, as if somebody was standing in the doorway and casting a shadow. And that's why I asked if anybody was up here with me.
Right.
It really looked like someone was there.
Okay, I'm going to switch over to quad. Oh, a globule, Barbie. A nice bright globule just came up from the couch, came right at you. And was a good solid white. Oh, okay, another one. Okay, yeah, another one just went. Oh, holy smokes!
It's huge.
You okay, Jane?
Yeah.
Which direction are they coming from?
Looks like they're coming from by where the lamp is.
What they're seeing downstairs are globules, and they seem to be coming from the area of the lamp. Most are actually going towards you. That's interesting.
While Barbie and I had been upstairs, Dave was monitoring the sound equipment, and he was keen for us to hear the unexplained noises that had been picked up in the empty stairwell next to the kitchen.
What was that?
I don't know. It was just before that dog barked.
Yeah.
Did somebody touch that microphone at all? Before that dog barked?
Did you hear that? No, John's in the back.
Something just came through this mic. That was when the dog barked.
Although the upstairs drawing room, known as the Red Room, had been the site of the most activity in the past, nothing had happened there yet tonight, and Dave felt it might be a good idea to have Bonnie sit in the room alone for a while.
She's experienced so many things in this house that she should be the one, if anything's going to happen in that room, she will draw it.
Right.
Watching the room on the monitor downstairs, we could see everything in the darkness thanks to the infrared camera. Bonnie and the furniture in the room, like the picture frame on the opposite wall, were clearly visible. But almost as soon as she sat down, we spotted a strange shape moving.
What's that up there?
Since Bonnie was alone in the room and there were no light sources, there was no obvious explanation for what we were seeing. When Dave suggested I join Bonnie in the Red Room, it was an offer I couldn't refuse. It seemed like something was happening, and this could be my chance to find out what. It was too dark to see anything, but the atmosphere was oppressive, and although only Bonnie and I were in the room, it didn't feel like we were alone.
I suddenly got this really bad, pressure pain behind my eye. Oh my God. It seriously feels like when you're on an aeroplane and the pressure drops. That's really weird. It's really cold in here now. What's that? I mean, no, because it definitely didn't sound like I can hear them obviously we can both hear them in the hall. But it did sound like because they're over that side of the wall, down on this line. And it wasn't creaky floorboards, it was footsteps. I felt the skin screaming on my back of my neck. Oh God, I keep shuddering. That sounded almost like someone was pushing the door.
After 15 minutes, I was glad to get out.
That was really quite creepy sitting in there. I mean, I suppose, playing devil's advocate, you could say that old houses make creaky noises and it's late and I'm tired, but it was... I did feel really creeped out in there. It just felt like the skin on the back of my neck and all down my spine was crawling. I was kept literally shuddering. But, I suppose it's possible to freak yourself out. But the noises really did sound like they were coming from the door. It really sounded like someone was right on the other side of the door, which was quite disturbing. And it was very cold, and it did genuinely feel at one point like there was a pressure drop in the room, literally, and huge pain behind my eyes, and it did just feel like suddenly the air became really thick. No, it was really, really strange.
Whether or not you believe in poltergeists, the suffering of the victims in these cases is undeniably real. From the unease of the people on the Edinburgh Ghost Tour to the trauma suffered by Janet at Enfield,
And what of the Beckwith family in New England? During my investigation, I met Bonnie's mother, who shared the family home. But just days after I returned to England, I received the tragic news that she'd died. She'd seemed in good health, and the family still don't know the cause of her death. But chillingly, Bonnie won't rule out the possibility that it was somehow connected with the dark presence in her house, that somehow it was the work of a poltergeist.
Well, I guess we'll never know. And the Most Haunted team are on a quest to uncover the ghostly mysteries of Smith Hills Hall, next on Living 2.